The black and white checkered floor of the Riverside Diner reflected the harsh fluorescent lights like a broken mirror, and at 3:22 in the morning, the place was nearly empty, just the hum of the refrigerator, the dying buzz of neon, and the stale smell of burnt coffee and grease hanging in air so thick it felt solid. Sofia Sinclair sat alone in a corner booth, her body folded into itself like something that had given up on taking up space. Her care facility uniform was stained with medication that didn't belong to her, her shoes splitting at the seams, her hands trembling as she stared at $5 on the table beside a photograph so worn the edges had turned soft. The photo showed a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. Her husband. Dead 3 years now. She had not eaten. She had not slept. The clock on the wall ticked past 3:23 a.m. when the glass door exploded inward. A child stumbled through, alone, her private school uniform torn at the shoulder, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. The girl was 6 years old, maybe 7, her breathing shallow and panicked. She collapsed against the nearest booth, her small body shaking. 17 seconds later, the door burst open again, and 3 men poured in like a storm that had learned to wear Italian suits. The first was enormous, 6'3", broad-shouldered, his white shirt untucked and torn, his $8,000 suit jacket abandoned somewhere in the night. His face was carved from granite, all hard angles and darker intentions, except for his eyes. His eyes were pure terror. This was Aleandro Calabrese, the most feared man in Seattle, the one whose signature appeared on documents that made people disappear, the one who controlled every shadow in the underworld from Ballard to Beacon Hill. He dropped to his knees beside the child, his hands, the same hands that had signed execution orders for 19 men, trembling so violently he couldn't touch her without risking harm. "Emma. Emma, stay with me," he whispered, his voice cracking like something fundamental was breaking inside his chest. Behind him stood Carlo and Enzo, his lieutenants of 15 years, weapons drawn and utterly useless. They had never seen their boss like this. In 15 years of loyalty and violence and brutal efficiency, they had never seen him afraid. They stood frozen in the doorway, their guns hanging at their sides as useless as flowers. But Sofia Sinclair moved. The woman who had been crying alone in the corner booth for 12 minutes straight, the woman with $5 to her name and no way to save her sister's life, the woman whose supervisor Douglas Hale had demanded $35,000 in 3 days or face permanent destruction, she moved like someone who had forgotten her own devastation existed. She grabbed napkins from the dispenser, filled a glass with water from the counter, and knelt beside the child with a precision that came from 8 years of caring for the elderly, from 8 years of moving through suffering with steady hands. "Hold her head steady," Sofia commanded, and her voice was firm despite the tears still wet on her own cheeks. "Do not move her neck. Just hold her steady." She cleaned the blood with gentle efficiency, checked the girl's pupils the way she had been trained, applied pressure to the wound with napkins folded into a compress. Her movements were competent. Confident. The movements of someone who knew exactly what to do when the world was breaking. "She needs stitches," Sofia said quietly, "but she is stable. Her breathing is returning to normal. Keep talking to her. Your voice will anchor her. She needs to know you are here." Aleandro stared at this woman who had appeared from nowhere, who was acting while he, the man who controlled an empire built on fear and ruthlessness, stood paralyzed. His hands had stopped trembling the moment she took over. His breathing had steadied. The most dangerous man in the city had been saved by a woman in a stained blue uniform with $5 in her pocket. "What is your name?" Emma whispered, her small hand reaching out and gripping Sofia's arm. "I am Sofia," she said softly. "And you are going to be okay. I promise you." Carlo and Enzo exchanged a look neither had seen reflected in the other's eyes in 15 years. Something had shifted in that moment. Something they did not have a name for yet. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance, growing closer, a sound like a knife cutting through the silence of the early morning. Before we continue with what happened next, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to understand how Sofia found herself alone in a diner at 3:22 in the morning with only $5 and a broken heart. The day had started like every other day for the past 8 years, with darkness. Sofia's alarm went off at 4:45 a.m. in a studio apartment so small that her bed was 6 feet from the kitchenette, the bathroom door opening directly into the sleeping area. She lay in that darkness for exactly 90 seconds before standing, because standing took time, and time was a luxury she could not afford to waste. Her body ached in 17 different places. The old burns on her back, curved and deliberate, throbbed with the cold. The welts from last month still hadn't fully faded. She showered in water so cold it made her gasp. The landlord, Mr. Chen, had turned off the hot water to save money, and dressed in her care facility uniform, a faded blue with coffee stains near the collar that had never fully washed out. She counted the money in her wallet as she made coffee. She always counted $37.56. She was supposed to make it last until Friday. It was Tuesday. The Hillcrest Senior Care Home sat in a converted mansion on Capitol Hill, a 3-story building painted institutional beige with windows that never quite closed properly. Sofia arrived at 5:30 a.m., 40 minutes early, the way she always did. Her supervisor Douglas Hale was already there, sitting in his office with a cup of coffee that cost more than she spent on groceries in a week. He was 47, overweight, with a kind of face that looked permanent angry. He had been her supervisor for 6 years. "Sofia," he said, not looking up from his desk. "My office." Now. She knew what this was about. Her sister's hospital bill. The one she had fallen behind on. The one that Douglas Hale had somehow learned about. His office was the size of her entire apartment. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. She sat down. She did not speak. In 8 years, she had learned when not to speak. "Your sister," he said slowly, "is at St. Mary's Hospital. Room 317. She needs surgery. Expensive surgery. $47,000, to be exact." Sofia's throat closed. "I have been helpful," he continued, his voice like oil, "because I am a generous man. I have let you leave early sometimes. I have let you take shifts other people wanted. And how do you repay me? By crying in the break room. By being distracted. By being useless." "I am sorry," Sofia whispered. "You are going to be more than sorry," he said. He leaned forward. His breath smelled like expensive coffee and something rotten underneath. "You are going to bring me $35,000. All of it. In 3 days. Friday at 5 p.m. If you do not, I will make sure that no care facility in Seattle hires you again. Not one. Do you understand me? You will never work in this city again. Your sister will die in the hospital room, and it will be because you could not meet a simple deadline." He smiled. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed watching understanding break across another person's face. Sofia left his office and worked the rest of the day in silence. She changed bedpans. She helped Mrs. Chen, no relation to her landlord, with her dentures. She combed Mr. Kozlov's hair. She did all of it while her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to escape a cage. $35,000. In 3 days. At 3 p.m., a woman named Rachel Dawson arrived. She was the owner of the Starlight Hotel downtown, 51 years old, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Sofia's monthly rent. She had pale blonde hair and eyes that looked at people like they were insects. She and Douglas Hale disappeared into his office for 40 minutes. When they emerged, they were smiling. Sofia finished her shift at midnight. The double shift, she had picked up extra hours to try to save money, meant she would not leave the building until 12:30 a.m. By then, the streets were empty. By then, the city belonged to the darkness. She did not go home. Home meant lying in that small apartment, staring at the ceiling, waiting for her body to hurt enough that sleep became possible. Instead, she walked. Her shoes, which had been splitting at the seams for 3 months, caught on the cold sidewalk. The November wind cut through her thin jacket like a blade wrapped in ice. She had $5 in her pocket. Somehow, this seemed like the most important fact about her entire life. She had $5. Her sister needed $47,000. Douglas Hale wanted $35,000. And in 3 days, she would have nothing but failure to offer him. The Riverside Diner was open 24 hours. She had walked past it 1,000 times but had never been able to afford to eat there. Tonight, she sat in a corner booth and ordered water. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes, did not comment. Sofia pulled out the photograph of her husband. She stared at his crooked smile for 12 minutes straight, tears sliding down her cheeks in a way that felt like her body was leaking out of her. And then the glass door exploded open, and a small girl with blood on her forehead stumbled inside, and everything changed. The alarm screams at 5:47 in the morning. Sofia Sinclair does not move. She lies in the darkness of her studio apartment, listening to the radiator, broken for 3 months now, and counting the breaths before she has to leave the bed. The October cold seeps through the window cracks like something alive, like something hunting. When she finally stands, her breath is visible. The apartment is so cold that her hands shake as she pulls on the blue care facility uniform, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, the collar stained from things she does not want to name. On the nightstand, in a frame she bought at a dollar store, is a photograph of her husband. Marcus. Dead for years now. His crooked smile looks at her from the darkness, and for a moment, just a moment, she lets herself believe he can see what her life has become. She touches the frame with one cold finger. Then she picks up her shoes. They are splitting at the seams. The drive to Maplewood Elderly Care Home takes 17 minutes. The sun is not yet awake. The city is empty except for delivery trucks and people like Sofia, people for whom the world only exists between 4 in the morning and 11 at night. She arrives at 6:32. Her shift begins at 7. She is early, as she always is, but this detail will not matter. The facility smells like antiseptic and something else underneath it, the smell of bodies slowly failing, of time running out. Sofia begins in room 104. The resident's name is Margaret. Margaret is 93 years old and has not spoken since her stroke 7 months ago, but Sofia talks to her anyway while she changes the bedpan, while she washes the dried medication from her skin, while she moves with the efficiency of someone who has learned to ignore her own body screaming. At 6:58, the office door opens. Douglas Hale stands in the hallway, watching her work. He is 42 years old but looks like something older, something that has been left in the sun too long. His hair is greasy. His teeth are stained with coffee and something darker. He wears khaki pants that do not fit correctly and a polo shirt that pulls across his stomach. But what makes him dangerous is not his appearance. It is the way he looks at people, the way he looks at her, like he is deciding whether they are worth keeping alive. Sofia. His voice is flat, administrative. My office. Now. She does not move immediately. She finishes wiping Margaret's forehead. She sets down the washcloth. Then she stands, and the room tilts for a moment because her back is screaming again, the welts underneath her uniform pulling tight and hot like they are being reopened in real time. You're blocking the hallway, he says. She walks past him toward the office. Behind her, she hears his footsteps, measured and slow, like a predator who knows the prey cannot escape. The office is small. There is a desk covered in papers, a chair he sits in, and a chair across from it where employees sit when they are about to lose something. Sofia sits. She has learned not to speak first. Not to ask questions. Not to move her hands in ways that might be interpreted as aggressive or disrespectful or anything other than absolute submission. Hale leans back in his chair. It creaks. How long have you worked here, Sofia? 8 years, she says. 8 years. And in those 8 years, have you learned anything about professional conduct? She says nothing. I'm asking you a question. Yes, she says. I've learned about professional conduct. Then why are you 3 minutes late to your shift? She was not 3 minutes late. Her shift begins at 7. She arrived at 6:32. But she says, "I'm sorry. I'll be on time from now on." He opens a drawer. He pulls out a folder. Inside the folder are photographs. She can see them from where she sits, and what she sees makes her body go absolutely still. The photographs are of her. Her back. The welts. The burn marks shaped like the coils of the stove in the break room. The scars that run in every direction like a map of hell. "Do you know who took these?" Hale asks. She does not answer. "Rachel Dawson. She's a hotel owner, very successful, very wealthy. Very concerned about your welfare. She came in yesterday asking questions about employee injuries. She seemed to think you might be hurting our residents, making these marks on yourself to frame the facility. She suggested we might need documentation for our insurance. The room is so quiet you can hear the clock on the wall. But I know what's really happening, Sofia. I know that you came to this job already damaged. I know that you've been here 8 years, and in those 8 years, I've watched you with great interest. Do you know what I've learned?" She cannot speak. The words are stuck somewhere in her chest. "I've learned that you have no one. No family that will call the police. No friends who check on you. A sister in Spokane who needs dialysis, but she's dependent on you, which means she can't afford to ask questions about where the money is coming from. And no one, absolutely no one, would believe you if you told them anything about what you claim happened here." He slides the folder across the desk. "Rachel Dawson has offered to help us document your history of instability. Help us understand what kind of person you really are. She's very good at helping people understand things. She's very good at making sure people see what she wants them to see." Sofia picks up the folder. Her hands are shaking. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me $35,000. In 3 days. By Friday at 5 p.m. I don't have $35,000. I know. That's the interesting part." He smiles. It is not a smile that reaches his eyes. "But you're going to find it. Because if you don't, I'm filing a report with the state saying you've been stealing medication. Rachel's going to testify that she saw you taking pills from the locked cabinet. The police will find those pills in your apartment, Sofia. You know how I know that? Because I'm going to put them there. And then I'm going to make sure every care facility in Washington state knows you're a thief and a drug user. And then you won't be able to get a job anywhere. Not at a grocery store. Not at a gas station. Nowhere." He leans forward. His breath smells like coffee and decay. "And then your sister, Hannah, is she? She'll need that dialysis treatment. $1,200 a week. Where will that money come from, Sofia? Who's going to pay for it when you can't work? Who's going to keep her alive when you've failed her?" Sofia stands. She does not remember standing, but she is standing, and her legs are trembling, and the room is tilting again. 3 days, Hale says. Friday at 5 p.m. My office. She walks out. In the hallway, the facility is waking up. Residents are calling for assistance. The morning shift staff are arriving, clocking in, beginning their rounds. No one looks at her as she passes, but it does not matter. They have all seen the same thing, a woman who works here, nothing special, nothing worth noticing. At 12:30 p.m., after she has finished her shift, Sofia drives her car. It is a 1998 Honda Civic with 287,000 miles on the odometer. The engine rattles in a way that suggests it might stop working at any moment, and she cannot afford to fix it, so she drives slowly, carefully, as if kindness toward the machine might convince it to keep running a little longer. Riverside Diner is open 24 hours. She has walked past it 1,000 times but has never been able to afford to eat there. Tonight, she parks in the lot and sits in a corner booth. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag that reads Violet, approaches. "What can I get you?" "Just water," Sofia says. Violet does not comment. She has seen this before, people who come to the diner at midnight, who order nothing, who sit until closing just to be somewhere warm and lit and alive with other human beings. Sofia pulls the photograph out of her pocket. It is worn at the edges from being handled so many times. Marcus is smiling his crooked smile. In the photograph, he is alive. In the photograph, she is someone's wife. In the photograph, the future contains hope. She stares at his face for 12 minutes straight. The tears come without warning. They slide down her cheeks in a way that feels like her body is leaking out of her, like she is disappearing, dissolving into nothing. She has $5 in her pocket. Her sister needs $47,000 for the surgery that might give her another decade. Douglas Hale wants $35,000 by Friday. And there is no way forward. There is no path out of this. There is only the knowledge that she has failed everyone who ever needed her, that she is failing them right now, in this moment, sitting in a corner booth in a diner she cannot afford, while her sister waits for money that will never come. The glass door explodes open. A small girl, 7 years old, with blood on her forehead and terror in her eyes, stumbles inside into the fluorescent brightness. She is wearing a school uniform, navy blue with a white collar. Her hair is disheveled. There is a bruise forming on her cheekbone. Everything inside Sofia, the terror, the failure, the despair, dissolves in an instant. She stands. She walks toward the child. Without thinking, without hesitation, she pulls the girl into her arms and whispers, "You're safe now. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you." The girl buries her face in Sofia's shoulder and begins to cry. The fluorescent lights hum their sickly song above the empty diner. Sofia sits in the corner booth, her body folded like something that has given up the fight. The checkered floor stretches in black and white squares beneath her worn shoes, held together with duct tape and desperation. Outside the window, the October wind cuts down the empty street like a blade wrapped in ice, and dead leaves scatter against the glass with a sound like fingernails scratching for escape. She pulls the photograph from her pocket with trembling fingers. Marcus. Her husband. Dead for years now in a construction accident that changed the mathematics of her entire life. He is smiling his crooked smile in the image, the one that made her believe in futures. She stares at his face and whispers words that the diner cannot answer. "I don't know what to do. I have $5. 3 days. I cannot save her." The tears come without warning, sliding down her cheeks in a way that feels like she is leaking out of herself, dissolving into nothing. Her sister Hannah needs dialysis. $47,000 for a surgery that might give her another decade of life. Douglas Hale, her supervisor, has demanded $35,000 by Friday. And Sofia has $5. $5 in her pocket. In the world. She does not hear the door open at first. The October wind announces it, a cold gust that makes her look up. A small girl stumbles through the threshold, 7 years old, wearing a navy blue school uniform with a white collar. Blood runs down her forehead. Her hair is disheveled. A bruise is forming on her left cheekbone like a dark flower blooming on pale skin. Everything inside Sofia, the terror, the failure, the despair, dissolves in an instant. She stands. She walks toward the child without hesitation, without calculation. She pulls the girl into her arms and whispers, "You're safe now. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you." The girl buries her face in Sofia's shoulder and begins to cry, her small body trembling like a candle in the wind. Sofia's hands move with a gentleness that surprises her own exhausted mind. She grabs napkins from the dispenser, fills a water glass from the fountain, and begins cleaning the wound on the child's forehead with careful fingers. "Are you safe? Are you hurt anywhere else?" The girl shakes her head, her eyes wide with shock. "I fell. I was trying to get home. I got lost." Sofia holds her closer. "You're safe now. I've got you." She does not ask the child's name. She does not ask for payment or identification or any of the questions that might complicate protection. She simply does what you do when someone small and scared needs you. She protects. The sound arrives before the sight, the screech of black SUVs stopping hard outside, tires gripping asphalt, engines cutting off with sudden silence. The diner door explodes inward. 3 men in expensive suits enter like a storm given human form. The first is tall, 6'3", with shoulders broad enough to block out light. His suit is charcoal grey, custom-tailored, worth more than Sofia has earned in 6 months. His white shirt is unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a chest marked with a scar that runs from his left eye down to his cheekbone. His watch is gold. His eyes are dark and burning with a terror that transforms instantly into something colder when he sees his daughter in a stranger's arms. Aleandro Calabrese. The name will mean nothing to Sofia for another 17 seconds. The other 2 men position themselves at strategic points. Carlo, shorter and broader, with a broken nose that speaks of decades spent in violence. Enzo, lean and quick-moving, with fingers that rest near his jacket in a gesture so practiced it looks like breathing. She's okay, Sofia says, her voice steady in a way that surprises her. She needs stitches but she's stable. She does not recognize the danger in the room. She is too accustomed to being invisible to understand that 3 men like these do not simply appear in diners at 3:22 in the morning unless something fundamental has shifted. Aleandro's voice cracks when he speaks, Emma. Baby, I'm here. He kneels beside them, and Sofia gently transfers the girl to his arms. She stands to leave, assuming her part is finished, assuming she can return to her corner booth and her $5 and her impossible mathematics. But Aleandro looks at her, really looks at her, and sees everything. The exhaustion carved into the landscape of her face. The tear-streaked cheeks. The uniform stained with medication and sweat from double shifts at the elderly care home. The shoes held together with duct tape because leather costs money. The way her hands are still trembling from the simple act of helping. What's your name? His voice is quiet, which makes it somehow more terrifying. Sofia Sinclair. You saved my daughter. He says it not as a compliment but as a fact, a debt, a shift in the order of things. Sofia shakes her head, I just helped. Anyone would have. Enzo, standing by the door, mutters to Carlo in a voice meant to be quiet, no one would have. Everyone in this city knows who he is. They'd be too afraid to touch her. Carlo nods, his jaw tight. In 15 years of working for Aleandro Calabrese, they have never seen him kneel for anyone except his daughter. And they have certainly never seen him touch a stranger's hands with such careful attention. But Sofia did not know who he was. And that makes all the difference in the world. His private doctor arrives within 11 minutes, summoned by a single phone call. The doctor examines Emma in the booth where she now sits, and his hands are steady and professional as he stitches the cut on her forehead with silk thread that costs more than Sofia's weekly rent. Sofia tries to leave 3 times. I should go. You don't need me here. I'm just, but Aleandro's voice, when he speaks, is absolute and quiet, stay. Carlo brings coffee. Real coffee, not the burnt sludge from the diner's aging machine. He places it in front of Sofia with a gentleness that makes Enzo's eyes widen. In 15 years, they have never seen their boss show this kind of care to anyone outside his blood. Emma, stitched and bandaged, climbs into Sofia's lap instead of her father's and falls asleep, her head resting against Sofia's chest. Aleandro watches this nobody woman hold his daughter with a tenderness that breaks something inside him. Something old. Something wounded. Something he buried so deep he thought it was dead. Why were you crying? He asks. His voice is not accusatory. It is curious. It is something deeper than curiosity. Sofia hesitates. Every instinct screams at her to lie, to protect herself, to stay invisible. But she is so tired. And sometimes exhaustion strips away all the careful walls we build. I owe someone $35,000. I have 3 days to pay or I lose my job and my sister dies. The words fall into the space between them like stones into still water. She tells him about Hannah. Dialysis. $1,200 every week. Sofia sends every dollar from 2 jobs, the elderly care home during the day, the hotel at night, and she has managed to save nothing because there is no money to save. The person I owe is my supervisor, Douglas Hale. He's been hurting me for 8 years. He steals tips. He forces double shifts. Her voice breaks. If I complain, he'll fire me and make sure no one hires me in Seattle again. His partner is Rachel Dawson. She owns hotels downtown. They're destroying me because they can, and no one is watching because I'm nobody. Aleandro's expression does not change, but Carlo sees his boss's hands curl into fists so tight his knuckles turn white. Enzo watches the muscles in Aleandro's jaw clench and release like he is grinding stone between his teeth. "Show me," Aleandro says softly. Sofia pulls up the back of her uniform. The scars are a map of hell written on pale skin, welts crisscrossing her shoulder blades, burn marks shaped like pan edges, bruises faded to yellow-green, one long slash that looks like it came from a blade. Enzo turns away, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth might crack. Carlo closes his eyes. Aleandro stares at the evidence of 8 years of systematic torture and feels a rage so cold it could freeze blood in veins. He remembers his own childhood. His father's belt. His mother's indifference. The poverty that ground him into dirt until he clawed his way out with violence and will and a coldness he learned to wear like armor. He swore then that no child would suffer like he did. But this woman is not a child. She is 31 years old and she has survived alone with no protection and no mercy. "Why would you help me?" Sofia whispers, pulling her uniform down. "I'm nobody. I'm nothing. I can't pay you back." Aleandro looks at her holding his daughter and says something that Carlo will repeat for years afterward. "You saved my child when the entire city would have turned away. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask for payment or protection or anything except whether she was safe. That's not nothing, Sofia. That's everything." At 4:48 in the morning, Douglas Hale's phone buzzes in his apartment 3 miles away. A message from Rachel Dawson appears on the screen. "The girl didn't go home. Find her. Make sure she understands what happens if she runs." Hale and Dawson arrive at Riverside Diner at 5:03 a.m. in Rachel's black Mercedes. Hale enters first, his face twisted into false concern. "Sofia, we've been so worried. You disappeared." He stops when he sees Aleandro Calabrese sitting across from her, Emma asleep in Sofia's arms, Carlo and Enzo standing like sentries on either side of the booth. Rachel enters behind him, her pearls catching the fluorescent light, her smile already forming. "Sofia, darling, we need to discuss." She sees Aleandro's face and her smile dies like a candle in wind. She knows exactly who he is. Every wealthy criminal in Seattle knows Aleandro Calabrese. Her hands begin to shake. Aleandro stands slowly, his 6'3" frame unfolding like a blade. The movement is not violent. It is worse. It is inevitable. "You're Douglas Hale." Not a question. Hale nods, confused. "And you're Rachel Dawson." "This woman owes me money," Hale says, trying to salvage control. "That's between us." "This woman," Aleandro interrupts, his voice so quiet it could cut glass, "is under my protection now." "Which means you have a problem." Carlo moves to the door, blocking the exit. Enzo pulls out his phone, already making calls. Rachel tries to back away but Aleandro's gaze pins her in place like a blade through flesh. "Sofia told me everything. 8 years. $35,000 in extortion. Scars on her back from your abuse." He looks at Hale. "You hurt her because she had no one. Because you thought no one would care." Hale's face goes from confused to terrified in 3 seconds flat. "I don't know who you think you are. I'm the man who decides whether you see tomorrow," Aleandro says. "And right now, I'm leaning toward no." But what neither villain knew was that Aleandro Calabrese did not make idle threats. And by the time the sun rose over Seattle, their entire world would be erased. Enzo shows her the news on his phone. FBI raids Dawson Hotel Empire, owner arrested on federal charges. The article is timestamped 6:02 a.m., 2 minutes into the future, because Aleandro's people control the narrative before it happens. At 6:07 a.m., federal agents arrive at the diner. They are not gentle. 24 men in dark windbreakers flood through the glass doors, their footsteps thundering across the black and white checkered floor like a drum announcing the end of an era. Rachel Dawson stands frozen in the center of the booth, her pearl necklace suddenly looking like a noose around her neck. The lead agent, a woman with iron-gray hair and a face carved from disappointment, holds up the warrant. Rachel Margaret Dawson, you are under arrest for federal human trafficking conspiracy, tax evasion, and racketeering. Rachel's mouth opens. No sound comes out. She tries to back away, but her designer heels catch on the booth's edge and she stumbles forward like a puppet with its strings cut. You can't do this. I have rights. I have lawyers. Your lawyers have already lawyered up for themselves, the agent says, snapping the handcuffs closed around Rachel's wrists with a sound like a cage door slamming shut. Conspiracy charges. They're looking at 10 to 15 years minimum. Sofia watches from her corner booth, Emma still asleep against her chest, the child's small hand curled around her neck like she is holding onto the only solid thing in a crumbling world. She does not recognize the expression on her own face until Aleandro steps beside her and says quietly, "Justice does not look how we think it will. It looks like this." Rachel is dragged away screaming obscenities that echo off the diner's vinyl walls. Her blonde hair comes loose from its perfect twist. Her designer dress tears on the doorframe. By the time they shove her into the federal SUV, she looks nothing like the woman who walked into this diner with her threats and her certainty. She looks like what she always was, a predator who preyed on the powerless, now helpless herself. The diner doors close. The echo of sirens fades. For 15 seconds, no one moves. Then Douglas Hale, still sitting in the opposite booth, starts to laugh. It is a sound like something breaking inside his chest. The laughter becomes crying. The crying becomes something worse, the sound of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time, knowing there is nowhere left to run. "Please," he whispers to Aleandro. "I have a daughter. She's 12 years old. If you do this to me, if I disappear, she'll grow up wondering what happened to her father." Aleandro looks at him with eyes like a storm over dark water. "Your daughter will grow up knowing her father was a coward who hurt women because he could. She will grow up knowing he was erased because he earned it. That is the story she will tell." Carlo and Enzo enter from the kitchen, where they have been waiting. Carlo is 6'2", 240 pounds of muscle and old scars. Enzo is leaner but faster, the kind of man who moves through shadows. Between them, they look like the end of hope. "No. No, please," Hale tries to stand but his legs betray him. He collapses back into the booth, his hands shaking so violently he cannot clasp them together. "You know what I found most interesting?" Aleandro says, pulling out his phone. He swipes through images, bank statements, employee records, photographs of 17 different women, all single, all vulnerable, all bearing the same 1,000-yard stare of people who have been hunted and broken. 17 women in 8 years. The oldest was 34. The youngest was 21. Some of them are still paying you money from the safety of houses where they hide from daylight. Hale's face goes from white to grey to a color that does not have a name. One of them jumped from the Aurora Bridge 3 years ago, Aleandro continues, his voice utterly flat. "She left a note. Your name was in it. She wrote, 'I could not live under the weight of what he did anymore.' Do you know what I did when I read that letter, Douglas? I made a decision. I decided that this would end tonight." At 6:15 a.m., 2 black SUVs pull around to the back of the diner. Through the kitchen window, Sofia watches Douglas Hale being escorted toward the alley, his legs barely supporting him, his voice reduced to a whimper. She knows what is about to happen. She does not know exactly how, but she knows the shape of it. The way outcomes are decided by men in expensive suits who have spent their lives removing obstacles. Carlo pauses at the back door and turns to Aleandro with a look Sofia recognizes from her old life, a subordinate asking for confirmation. Aleandro nods once, a gesture so small it would be invisible to anyone not watching for it. Sofia looks away. Emma stirs in her sleep and presses her face deeper into Sofia's shoulder. The child's breathing is steady, innocent, untouched by the knowledge of what is happening 3 feet away. Sofia thinks about Emma's mother, about how this child almost became another 17-year-old with scars she could not explain. She thinks about the bridge. She thinks about the note. When she looks up again, Douglas Hale is gone. The sound of engine starting fades into the October night. The rain that has been threatening since midnight finally begins, soft and persistent, washing the Seattle pavement clean. Carlo and Enzo return through the kitchen, their expressions unchanged, but there is something different in the way they move, a heaviness, a finality, like men who have just closed a door on something that will never open again. Aleandro sits back down across from Sofia. He does not speak. He simply watches her with those stormwater eyes, waiting for her to understand what has happened. Not just tonight, but in the minutes before, in the phone calls made to federal agencies, in the wiretap placed in Rachel's office at 4:38 a.m., in the careful orchestration of justice that required coordination between his people and people sworn to uphold the law. He will never hurt anyone again, Aleandro says finally. And neither will she. Sofia's voice comes out broken like glass. Where did he go? Away. Will he come back? No. She nods slowly. She understands what away means in Aleandro's world. She understands that there are different kinds of justice, the kind written in law books and the kind written in blood and consequence. She understands that she has been saved by a man who moves through darkness like darkness moves through the world. Thank you, she whispers, and the words feel too small for what she means. Aleandro leans across the table. His hand covers hers, and it is warm. You saved my daughter when no one else would have stopped. When everyone else would have walked past her bleeding on the sidewalk and called it someone else's problem. You saved her because you remembered what it felt like to be broken and forgotten. That debt will never be repaid. Not in your lifetime. Not in mine. Sofia's eyes close. When she opens them again, Emma is awake. The little girl looks up at her with eyes the color of her father's, with that same ancient knowing, and asks in a voice like a prayer, "Am I safe now?" Sofia looks at Aleandro. He nods. Yes, Sofia says to Emma, and for the first time in 8 years, she believes it. You are safe now. And so am I. The diner is quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the breathing of 3 people and 1 small child who will grow up knowing that there are still people in this world who will reach out when you are drowning. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. The coffee in the pot has gone cold. But in this moment, in this small corner of Seattle as dawn approaches, something broken has been made whole. The dawn light falls across Sofia's face like a blessing she does not believe she deserves. 6 weeks have passed since the October night when her world split in 2, before and after. Before, she was invisible. After, she is something else entirely. She stands in the lobby of Calabrese's private care facility, adjusting the name tag on her uniform. The fabric is clean. The pay is real. Her sister Hannah's dialysis is scheduled for Thursday at 2 in the afternoon, and for the first time in 8 years, Sofia knows the money will be there. A woman in a wheelchair rolls past, squeezing Sofia's hand. Thank you, dear. You remembered my daughter's birthday. Sofia smiles, and it does not crack her face. Of course I did, Mrs. Chen. This is what survival looks like when you stop bleeding. The photograph of Marcus sits in her locker, tucked behind her extra uniform. Her late husband stares out from that 5x7 frame with the same expression he wore on their wedding day, like he could not believe he had been given something so precious. He had protected her for 6 years. When the construction crane collapsed on him, that protection died too. For 4 years after, Sofia learned that protection was something you had to manufacture yourself, that survival was a skill like any other, that you could live without hope as long as you did not stop moving. Then came the night that rewrote everything. At 3 o'clock, the door chimes. Emma Calabrese runs through the lobby in a burgundy school uniform, her hair braided with ribbons, her father's dark eyes gleaming with joy. She is 6 years old and already carries herself with the confidence of someone who has been saved and knows what that means. "Sofia! Sofia! I made you something!" Emma shouts, and the other residents turn to look. They always turn to look when Emma arrives. They have learned that this child is the epicenter of something important, that the way Aleandro Calabrese watches Sofia tells a story about the world that contradicts everything they thought they understood about power and cruelty. Sofia kneels. Emma thrusts a drawing at her, crayon on white paper, a woman with long dark hair holding a small child, both of them surrounded by a yellow sun. The colors are applied without precision but with absolute certainty. This is how Emma sees the world, in bright, uncomplicated truths. "That's you and me," Emma says. "When you saved me." Sofia's throat tightens. "And you saved me, sweetheart. You reminded me why any of this matters." Aleandro stands near the reception desk, watching this exchange. He wears a charcoal suit that costs more than Sofia's monthly rent, a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, cufflinks that catch the light like frozen water. His hands are relaxed at his sides, but Carlo and Enzo, stationed near the entrance, have already scanned the lobby 3 times. Even in peace, there is always vigilance in this world. Carlo leans toward his boss. "She's good with her." Aleandro does not respond. He simply watches Sofia help Emma onto her lap, watch the girl lean her head against Sofia's shoulder, watch the photograph of his late wife, Emma's mother, dead from illness 5 years ago, move silently through the room as a ghost that only he can see but that Sofia somehow understands. That evening, when Emma has been picked up and the facility has dimmed into the quiet routine of evening care, Sofia sits on a bench outside the building. November has arrived, bringing with it that peculiar Seattle cold that cuts through warmth without warning. Dead leaves scatter across the concrete. The parking lot is mostly empty. Aleandro finds her there. Of course he finds her there. He has men who track movements, who know schedules, who report back in hushed tones about the woman who works in his facility and speaks to residents like they are human beings instead of problems to be managed. He sits beside her without asking permission. In 15 years of running an empire built on violence and will, he has learned that some things do not require asking. "Your sister," he says. It is not a question. Hannah called this afternoon. Her latest blood work came back good. Stable. The doctor used the word improved. Sofia's voice cracks on that last word. "I thought I had lost her. I thought by the time I saved enough money, she would already be gone. That I would be sending dialysis payments to a grave." Aleandro nods slowly. "And now?" "Now she might get to live. She might get to graduate high school and go to college and fall in love with someone who treats her better than I was treated. She might get to be more than what our mother made us into." Sofia turns to look at him. "Because of you. Because you erased a debt I had no way to pay and gave me work that pays enough to dream." Aleandro's jaw tightens. He is not a man accustomed to gratitude. Gratitude implies vulnerability. It implies that someone has given him something he could not have taken. In his world, that distinction matters. "The first night I met you," he says, "you were crying in a diner at 3 in the morning because you were trapped. You had just worked a double shift at a care facility where your supervisor burned you with cigarettes and called it discipline. You had $5 to your name. And when my daughter walked in bleeding, with no idea who I was or what I could do for her, you cleaned her wounds anyway." He pauses. The sound of the parking lot at night is minimal, distant traffic, the hum of the building's heating system, the percussion of wind in the trees. "My father beat me," he continues, "from the time I could walk until the day I became stronger than him. He used his hands and his belt and his voice like weapons. My mother watched every time and did nothing. She chose comfort over courage. She chose her own survival over mine. When I was old enough to understand what that meant, I decided that if I ever had the power to stop suffering, I would not hesitate. That I would not be my mother. Sofia's eyes are wet. She does not wipe the tears away. You had nothing, Aleandro says. No power. No protection. No one to call. And you still chose to help. That is the rarest thing in this world, Sofia. That is the thing that makes a person worth saving. That is why I did it. Sofia's voice is barely audible. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. Aleandro turns to face her fully. Sometimes it changes too. The photograph of Marcus is still in her locker, but Sofia no longer takes it out every day. She has learned that the dead stay dead, that grief transforms over time from a crushing weight into something more like a scar, present, but no longer actively bleeding. She has learned that it is possible to honor the people we have lost without letting their absence consume us. 3 months into her new position, Sofia begins working toward her nursing certification. Aleandro pays for the classes without her asking. When Carlo questions this decision, Aleandro simply says, she will be better at this than anyone else we hire. Let her become what she is capable of becoming. And Sofia becomes. In 6 weeks, she moves from care assistant to licensed vocational nurse. Her first official shift, she walks through the facility with a badge with her name on it, Sofia Sinclair, LVN, and something inside her that has been broken since childhood begins to stitch itself back together. Hannah calls that night, her voice animated in a way Sofia has not heard in years. You sound different, her sister says. You sound like you believe you're going to be okay. I do, Sofia whispers. For the first time, I actually do. The video closes with text on screen. The moral is simple and devastatingly true. True strength is not measured in power or wealth or the ability to destroy your enemies. True strength is the choice to show compassion when the world has given you every reason to become cruel. One act of kindness, offered freely and without expectation of return, can rewrite the trajectory of 2 lives. If this story moved something in your chest, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to believe that rescue is possible. Subscribe because tomorrow we return with another story of survival, of second chances, of the unexpected moments that prove humanity still pulses beneath the surface of the darkest cities. What would you have done in Sofia's place? Leave a comment below. Tell us how this story made you feel. We read every single one. Every comment you leave is a source of light that helps us continue creating these stories. Thank you for staying until the end. We wish you good health, peace in your heart, and days filled with moments that remind you that one hand reached out at the right moment can change everything. Goodbye for now. We will see you in the next video.